Hi. I'm Leanne, and I blog over at Healthful Pursuit. So if you don't know me, I'm going to start off by telling you a little bit about me, because I have a pretty, what people will say, an awesome story. I don't know about that, but sometimes it helps put into perspective the things that I may recommend when we're talking about the 9 reasons why you're not fat adapted yet. So I wrote a little book. Well, it's not little. It's like, I think it's 2.3 pounds, so it's quite a heavy book. It's called The Keto Diet. I am an international best-selling author for that book. I'm also the host of the Keto Diet podcast. We actually just hit 5 million downloads of the show. So if you guys listen to the podcast, thank you so much for downloading all of the episodes and setting the intention of listening to every episode. I also graduated from nutrition school 11 years ago. I went to a school called CSNN up in Canada. That's where I'm from originally. And I also love campfires and puppies. So if you follow Healthful Pursuit, you know that my husband and I sold all of our worldly possessions back in August of last year, renovated an RV, and moved into it. And so we have 3 dogs and the 2 of us in around 180 square feet. So we do a lot of campfires, and we have 3 dogs, so I better love puppies in such a small space. Oops. Okay, so my story. I found the ketogenic diet back in 2014, and it was really in this time in my life, and I'm sure a lot of you can feel me on this, of I have tried everything. I am watching all of the videos, I am listening to all of the podcasts, I am doing step 1 to 100, I'm meal planning, I'm meal prepping, I'm doing everything, and it's not working. What do I do? When I studied holistic nutrition back in 2007, I was a vegan, I was a raw food vegan, and I quit birth control, hormonal birth control. And fast forward a couple of years, I haven't gotten my period back, I'm a marathon runner, I'm cycling, I'm doing all these things, and I'm not gaining muscle, I'm gaining fat, and I don't know what to do. And my naturopathic doctor says, "Have you heard of low carb?" And I'm like, I'm an athlete. Are you nuts? You can't eat low carb. I mean, I put gels on top of my Medjool dates while I run 18 kilometers. There is no way that I can go low carb. But when you get to that point where you've done everything and you're kind of at your wit's end, I'd done paleo, it didn't stick, I couldn't figure it out, it didn't feel good, I got really constipated, TMI maybe, but let's face it, we all get constipated sometimes. And so I decided I'm gonna give this ketogenic diet a try for 30 days. So day 0, I was vegan. Day 1, I was keto, and I ate a lot of bacon and dipped that in mayo and thought it was the craziest, coolest experience ever because I felt like such a rebel. And things started to change for me. I lost 20 pounds of hormone weight gain. I started feeling better mentally. I was able to go off my ADHD medication, and I was feeling really, really great. But then some not so awesome things started happening about 6 months in. I could not sleep. I went 8 days without sleeping. My hair was falling out like crazy. Some people will say that it's okay to lose hair on keto, but when you are having to vacuum your bed because there's so much hair in it, you're sort of like, I don't know if I want to trust the universe on this one. And so I started to feel really helpless again because my mind was feeling lit up and I had lost all this weight, but I wasn't feeling optimal. And I really lost myself in this ketogenic space of counting my macros and forcing myself to fast and doing all of these things that I kind of forgot that the reason I started the ketogenic diet was to get my period back. It had been 7 years since I had had a period. And so I just thought, how do I figure out how to do keto but have this whole food approach to it? And then I just thought, wait, why don't I just merge the 2 together? So that's when I developed the Fat Fueled protocol, which is a bit of what we're going to talk about today. It's in my program, Fat Fueled. It's also in the keto diet. And after I switched to this whole food-based approach, I ended up getting my period back in 9 months. And so back in 2014, when I was discovering keto, it was a very different space. There weren't conferences like this. We had minimal community. There were very little women chatting about keto. In fact, I think there was just like one other lady talking about keto at that point. And there was limited variability to our diet choices. So when this holistic nutritionist over here is like, hey guys, I think we need to like eat more carbs on our ketogenic diet to regulate our hormones, people were like, that's not keto. You can't be keto. And so a lot of people thought I was crazy. And we're going to chat a little bit about the role of carbohydrates in your ketogenic diet. I know my first KetoCon presentation was all about carbing up and cyclical ketosis, and I was sure standing on the stage in September that people would be throwing fat bombs at me, like, get off the stage, carbs aren't in your ketogenic diet. A lot has changed since then, and I know that a bunch of other people are going to be chatting about this week, and just how to use this to your advantage. So fat fueled has a couple of pieces to it. The first is that our food choices are going to be bursting with nutrients to support our body. That's the number one. And when we use those nutrients and we have more nutrients pumping through our body, some pretty cool things happen. It makes it so that we have this ongoing process that will grow our knowledge, and we're adjusting and tweaking for our body. We're able to create more balance, and we have the power to cultivate our body hinged on trust, respect, and love. And that's part of the Fat Fueled protocol, is knowing that you can trust your body, and your body does know best. And when you have that at the core of the way that you choose to eat and in your eating style, you're able to answer all of your questions. You don't need to listen to a ton of podcasts to seek for the answers outside unless you need new tools, unless you're a little bit stuck and you're like, what can I add to my toolkit? So by following the Fat Fueled approach, we're really putting the power in your hands and your body to trust it. And when you have that power, you have the answers and you have an awareness and respect for your body. So I wanted to kind of go through that before we got into today's topic so that you could get a sense of where I'm coming from when it comes to the 9 reasons why you're not fat adapted yet. And it's not a matter of just eat more fat and adjust your macros, because that's only such a small portion of the entire conversation. So today's goal is for all of you, if you're feeling just a little bit stuck in a certain area of your ketogenic diet, that we can get you unstuck with that. So we want to understand what's keeping you from becoming fat adapted, why your ketone reading isn't going up the way that you had hoped it would, and why you're not able to hit your keto goals. So because we're going to be chatting about fat adaptation, I thought it'd be really helpful to define what that is, because some people will define it differently depending on who it is. But since I'm the one on stage, we're going to go with this way of how I describe it, in that fat adapted and ketosis, in both places, we're burning fat as fuel. But with fat adaptation, we may not be in a state of actual ketosis. Our body knows how to burn fat as fuel. It's quite comfortable in that. But if we were to test our ketones, there's probably nothing there. Whereas in ketosis, we're fat adapted. Well, we might be fat adapted. We're in a state of ketosis. Our body's generating ketones. We may or may not be comfortable with burning fat just yet. So I'll give you a couple of examples of what I mean by this. So in the first tile over here in purple, you have the CrossFit athlete that eats high-fat paleo diet. Okay, so they're probably not in a ketogenic state because they eat a ton of carbs all the time. But they also eat a lot of fat, and because they work out a lot and they eat a lot of fat, they are fat adapted. So they're fat adapted, but not in ketosis. Then you have this woman over here in the orange, and she just got pregnant. Maybe she's in her second trimester. And right before she got pregnant, she was eating a ketogenic diet for a year. But once she got to that second trimester, oh man, did she want carbs. So she ended up having carbs every other meal, maybe just at dinner time, 2 to 3 times a week. So because she came into her pregnancy in a ketogenic state, her body really knows how to burn fat. And so when she has that touch of carbohydrates in the evening, she's bouncing back from being in ketosis to still staying fat adapted. And I mean, I see this. I can eat a cassava at dinner time, I take out some of my fat from my meal, eat a cassava at dinner time. The next morning I wake up, my ketones are maybe 0.5, and by the evening they're 2.3 again. So this is what she's doing. She is fat adapted and sometimes in ketosis. Then you have this lady in the turquoise or teal, depending on how you see colors. She's in ketosis, and she's been eating a low-carb, high-fat ketogenic diet for 2 weeks. So she's starting to maybe generate a couple of ketones. She's starting to see the benefits, but her body's not totally in fat adaptation stage because she's only been in it for 2 weeks. Whereas once she's been in it for 5 weeks in the green box there, she's starting to generate ketones. Her body now knows how to burn fat as fuel, and now she's in ketosis, plus she's fat adapted. So that allows more of that metabolic flexibility. So now that we have that kind of defined and we're all on the same page, the 9 reasons why you're not fat adapted yet is what we're going to be chatting about. And if your keto life couldn't be better right now and you're like on top of the world and everything is perfect, amazing. That's great. And so you may find that some of the things that I go through today are kind of like basic. But something that I've learned being in ketosis for over 4 years is that basic things can be really helpful, because sometimes we forget those basics and we go so far off on the right side of things that when we look back at the basics, we're like, wait, I totally forgot that was a tool that I could use. But if you are having a challenging time with one aspect of your ketogenic diet, we're hopefully going to become friends over the next 30 minutes. So some things you might be experiencing include weight gain, cravings, intense hunger, body pains, hormonal imbalances, sleeping issues, digestive issues, headaches, the list goes on. And I really, really, really want to just take one moment to say that when we compare ourselves to other people's highlight reels of social media, and we say, oh, but this lady over here, she started a ketogenic diet 4 weeks ago. She's down 30 pounds. Why can't I have that? I'm just going to push harder. We can't compare ourselves to other people. We need to take a moment to look back where we were a week ago, 2 weeks ago, a year ago, and compare ourselves to ourselves. That's really the only marker that we can use. So while I'm standing here saying 9 reasons you're not fat adapted yet, please, please think of yourself as the marker of your own success and not other people. Because some people, it just takes a really long time to become fat adapted, and that's okay. We need to understand that for many of us, for myself included, I had been eating not right for my body for almost 30 years. I can't expect for everything to be sunshine, rainbows, and lollipops after 6 weeks. Like, it's just not possible. Even eating keto for over 4 years now, I'm still discovering things about my body and still healing it. I actually just went to a doctor's appointment and had a bunch of stuff checked, and the doctor was like, there's nothing wrong with you. And that was such a crazy experience of being like, oh my gosh, I don't need to fix anything. Okay, so now I can start working on my mind and how I think about things. And so it's a constant evolution. So what we really want to experience on our ketogenic diet is a reduction of inflammation, balanced hormones, balanced digestion, a great mood, no brain fog. We want to be able to be sitting in a hammock, enjoying our lives and not thinking about food because it's been 5 hours since we ate and we're just enjoying that life. Easy to skip meals, satiation between meals, endless energy. Like, these are the things we want to feel. And if you're not feeling all of these things or even more things that you didn't think was possible, there's more stuff that we can do and just little tweaks that you can do on a daily basis or a weekly basis in order to feel better every day. So you're probably wondering, like, that's great, Leanne, but like, how do I do this long term? So there are 3 huge fixes that I've found in my transition from the standard ketogenic protocol over to this fat-fueled protocol that I found really helpful and powerful in order to become fat adapted and have keto be this awesome thing that makes me a better human, but that doesn't rule my life. So the first one is food quality. And with food quality, our goal here is to reduce our inflammation. So the question you need to ask yourself is, what are the types of foods that you're eating, and how do we boost the quality of those foods? So the number one thing, and people tell me all the time, like, oh, Leanne, you hate dairy. I don't hate dairy. Dairy hates me. I swear they started it. And so with dairy, I can't eat it. And if you can and you don't react to it, that's so awesome. But when you have a standard approach to your eating, say you've been eating a SAD diet for many, many, many years, and somebody says, increase your fat. what's the first thing you do? Dairy, because that's the only fat you know. So I see constantly that people rely 100% on dairy for their fat when really we need to add that variety. So a way to do that is replacing cheese or cream cheese or cheese or cheese or cheese with things like coconut oil, avocado oil, olive oil, nuts and seeds. If you start soaking your nuts and seeds, it's like a whole different nut or seed. Like it takes on a whole different shape and you can have a lot of fun with it. A secondary choice would be going for grass-fed options, if that's something that you're able to do, or even organic options. Then we have processed meat. And back in 2014, if you searched #keto on Instagram, it was all processed meat. And it's definitely getting better, but being mindful of going for grass-fed, grass-finished options when we can, going for organic options if the grass-fed stuff isn't an option, or even if you love like processed meat, going for ones that are nitrate-free or no added nitrates are just a little bit better than the super processed meat. And then you have artificial sweeteners. And, you know, over time, when I first started keto, I relied so heavily on stevia. Like, I couldn't go a day without eating at least 15 drops. I added it to my coffee and my puddings and my milkshakes and all the things. Now, I find a cashew to be one of the sweetest things ever. So it really takes some adjustment. So if you're just starting with keto and you love those sweet things, having an odd bowl of strawberries isn't going to kill you and you'll be fine. Or just adding a couple slices of strawberries on a meal to give it that sweetness without having to rely on sweeteners. Or sweetening with stevia or monk fruit if you need to. Or even, like I said, finding the sweetness in the foods that you eat on a daily basis. So the second mega easy fix that we can all do is our carb intake, and adjusting our carb intake with the goal of finding our carb tolerance so that we can boost our nutrient intake. And before you think I'm saying like, just pound some cupcakes because you can increase your carbs, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying like, if you're like me on the ketogenic diet and you're standing in front of your food scale with a little Tupperware on it and all the broccoli in there and you're panicking, because you may have just eaten 5 grams extra of broccoli and oh my gosh, I just went over my carb allotment and what am I going to do? And now I got to eat more fat or less fat. Do I need to work out? I need to go for a walk. I'm going to go run for 10 minutes. That should solve this. Like if that is your reality, it's nuts. And it gets us so out of whack with our entire body. So with this second easy fix, it's really important that if you're insulin resistant and you know that you have an insulin problem, that you keep your carbs relatively low. But when I started the ketogenic diet, I was very insulin resistant. And I wanted to eat keto so that I could solve that. So I think it's a little nuts that after years of eating keto, people are like, no, I just eat 20 grams of carbs. It's like, but your body changes. I mean, you want your body to change. Aren't we all here to feel better and heal our bodies? So we have to know that our macros are going to change as our body changes, and that's a good thing. So if you're kind of stuck in that low level of carbohydrates and you're finding like, if I could just eat a bowl of kale and not worry about it, then let's find out how much kale you can eat and stay into ketosis. So one of the best things that I discovered a couple of years ago with a bunch of my clients as well as myself is doing this little carbohydrate test. And that is every 5 days, increase your carbohydrates by 5 grams in the form of nutrient-dense foods. Like we're talking kale, broccoli, those sorts of things. And continue to increase every 5 days for 20 days. Then, when you get to the top of that range, spend the next 20 days lowering it by 5 every 5 days. Keep a little journal, write down how you're feeling, track your blood sugar, kind of see how things are going. And you'll be able to very much define what amount felt best for you. And if you're not sure, do it again. And so in that way, you can find out how your moods were and how your blood sugar was, how your cravings were, your hunger, and how you felt overall. Maybe your headache went away when you ate more kale. That's cool. Keep that in your back pocket. And everyone's blood concentration will be a little bit different, but my ideal is anywhere between 3 to 3.5 millimoles per liter. The third mega easy fix is adding variability to your diet in the form of adjusting your food intake. So if you guys have listened to the Keto Diet podcast for quite some time, I had Dr. Jason Fung on the show in some of the first episodes, and he said, if you're fasting, you don't also count your calories, because fasting will naturally figure everything out for you. You don't have to reduce the amount of calories you're eating, it'll just happen. And when we get in the middle of that and we force our bodies to like eat the same amount of food every day, our metabolism hates that. So instead of thinking of fasting as a way to just not eat and create cellular regeneration, well, all that's really cool, you can also see it as a really awesome way of adding variability to the amount of calories you eat without having to care about it. So I had a really horrible relationship with fasting. I thought fasting meant that I had to be hungry all the time and then I was doing it right. And I can't tell you how many people I meet that that's how they feel about fasting, when in actuality it should be like, oh my gosh, it's 3 o'clock, I haven't eaten? Cool. Like, that's how it should be. And so any of those apps and timers, if you have a fasting app or timer, and you have a blistered relationship with food, or you've been on diets for as long as you can remember. I mean, I met a lady the other day that went on her first diet when she was 3 years old. Like, what kind of relationship do you think she has with her body? And so by putting it on an app and a timer, we're just pushing ourselves to these limits, when in actuality, it should just happen quite naturally. And when it happens naturally, we're allowing our bodies to become fat adapted a lot quicker than usually what happens is eating too much, too often, while also fasting, and then binging after that fast, and we get in the way of our own success when it comes to that. So if you're in that boat with fasting and you want to add this natural variety to your diet, where one day you're eating 800 calories, the next day you're eating 2,500 calories, and then the following day it's 1,200, then it's 1,800, then it's 0 because you fasted all day, on average over a week, you'll be kind of sitting around the 1,500 calorie mark, but you'll be going up, down, up, down, up, down, and your metabolism likes that. You might want to try setting the intention to skip breakfast tomorrow instead of setting the app before you go to bed, like we've all done it. It's like, okay, fast starts now, and then it alerts you when you get to the time that you want. And if you find like you're hungry in the morning and you just can't make it, a light raw fuel latte might be helpful. That's a drink that I came up with that's dairy-free, that's like a fatty coffee, but not really because it doesn't have dairy. So if you're like, how am I supposed to limit dairy if I drink a butter coffee every day? I thought of that. Just go to the Google machine, type in rocket fuel latte. Problem solved. And then supplementing with exogenous ketones when needed is also helpful. I never, ever would have said that a year ago. I would never have said that. I felt like a lot of people abused exogenous ketones, but they can be very helpful for encouraging a fast if you're traveling a lot and you just don't have access to food. You could break up your fast whenever you're hungry. If you commit to a fast, it doesn't mean you need to push yourself to that limit, because your body's trying to tell you something. Whether it was that you ate too many carbs yesterday, you had a stressful morning, we need to be able to listen to that and adjust for that in order to stay fat adapted and also be able to burn fat a lot easier. Okay, so those are like the 3 mega easy fixes and kind of the core of the fat fueled profiles that I go through in the keto diet and fat fueled. But then we have these 6 more reasons why you may not be fat adapted yet. And these require a little bit more finesse, which is why I left them to here, because they're kind of easy, but not as easy as the first 3. So the first one here is protein intake. Then we have our testing methods, our fat intake, and you'll notice that protein is before fat, and I'll explain why in a second. And we might be eating too much, too often. We also have our blood sugar and cortisol. So the 4th reason why you may not be fat adapted yet or feeling great on your ketogenic diet is that you're either not eating enough protein or eating too much protein. And there's this whole fear back in 2014, especially in the ketogenic community, and I know it still exists today, that gluconeogenesis is this scary boogeyman that's going to kick us all out of ketosis faster than we can say steak. And it's just not true. And we're seeing that with the carnivore keto people that are eating nothing but animals, and their ketones are higher doing that than they are with keto, eating all the fat only. So we know that this exists, and I saw this when I was doing the trials with a lot of the women that I worked with back in 2015 when I was developing the Fat Fueled program is that I developed a specific profile called Pumped Keto because I saw that there were people that thrived on eating a ton of protein, way more than fat, and they actually felt better on a ketogenic diet and could generate more ketones that way. So I love that people are starting to talk about this carnivore experience. I'm not sure how I feel about it 100%, but I like that it's a tool that we can use in our toolbox in order to discover if it works best for us or not. So you may be in the camp of eating too much protein, you may be in the camp of eating not enough protein, but what I really want you to take away is that protein is something we need to define first before we define our fat, and that protein doesn't need to be feared by all. Then we have our fifth reason, which is our testing methods. So our goal here is to incorporate a more reliable testing method. Now for me, I hate testing. In Canada, the strips are like $4 to test your blood. And I calculated it out for months and was like, oh my gosh, I'm spending $300 a month testing my ketones. Like, that is not okay. And so now I go off how I feel because I've been eating ketogenic for quite some time. But I understand that if you haven't been eating keto maybe for a couple of months and you're still unsure, like, what does this feel like? It can be hard to pinpoint exactly. And so a lot of people go for the urine test strips, and probably many of you know that although those can be reliable for the first couple of weeks, I know for myself, I was like testing my urine. I was like, eggplant purple, totally winning. And then I woke up one day and it was totally gone. And I was like, oh my gosh, what do I do? I'm going to do a 36-hour fast. And when in actuality, it's just that it's not the most reliable test because our body stops dumping those ketones into our urine. So what we can do instead, if you're totally worried about the fact that you're not sure how to test how you feel, how I test how I feel is if I'm alert. I don't feel like I have ADHD because that is my history. If I can go long periods of time without eating, or when I am hungry, I'm not like, get out of my way, I need to eat right now, then chances are I'm doing pretty good. But you can also test your blood sugar as a really good way to see where you're at with your ketones. If testing your blood isn't an option, or if testing your breath isn't an option. I've tested my breath a lot, and I'm not sure how I feel about it personally. I've tracked a lot of that, and I find that blood is a lot more accurate, but I'll leave that to you. Now, the sixth reason you may not be fat adapted yet is your fat intake. So the goal here is that we want to eat more fat, but like I said before, you might get into ketosis at 85% fat. And you might be there for a couple months and everything's going well, and all of a sudden you hit a weight stall and you're like, well, that doesn't make sense. There could be a lot of reasons, and we won't get into weight stalls today because that's a whole other conversation that I love talking about. But what could be happening is that we need to adjust our macros, because what worked for you 2 months ago may not work for you now. I mean, now you're more insulin regulated and your mood is more stable. So it makes sense that your macros need to be adjusted because of that. So while you may have gotten into ketosis at 85%, you may actually thrive now at 60% fat. And perhaps there's a really, really stressful period in your life, and then you might need 70% or 75%. And so you might also be on the flip side of that. And I know for myself, coming at it from a low-fat, like vegan, I used to cook with water, and I was really proud of that. To then start eating fat, it was really, really hard for me, and it took me a really long time to actually understand the sheer amount of fat that I needed to eat on a daily basis to feel good. Some of my favorite ways to boost fat that don't have any dairy include things like pork rinds with chimichurri. If you've not had chimichurri, you haven't lived. What's wrong with you? Get on it. We're keto. This is like a staple. So chimichurri, pork rinds with vegetables, and you could just eat chimichurri by itself. I've done it. No judgment. Then we have nut butters with celery. Any kind of nut butters will do. One of my favorite snacks is macadamia nuts in a bowl with a ton of coconut oil on top when it's like room temperature, like sort of soft, with some salt. And that's a great snack too. Cacao butter is the fat from chocolate, and they come in like little circle wafers, and you can use them like as crackers. So these are fat crackers. They're just fat. And you can dip them in things like nut butter. You can eat them by themselves. You can add it to fatty coffee. So that's a really good snack too. MCT oil powder, we have a lot of it in our house, and we have like 3 little pantries. Like remember, like RV living, like it's like this. And they're all MCT oil powder across the bottom because I love it so much. So we added to things like soups and stews and, drinks and teas and fatty milkshakes and everything. Then you have things like guacamole, which you could just make guacamole on its own, or you could add MCT oil to it, which is the best. And then you have meat sticks and mayo. And if you're not a big fan of processed meat, like this girl right here, you can make your own meat sticks by cooking up a bunch of chicken thighs, cutting them into strips, and freezing them, and using that as your lunch meat stick to be able to dip in things. We use steak. Sometimes we'll cut the steaks and then cook them a little bit more so they get a little bit tougher, and you can just make meat sticks. Try saying that 6 times. Oh my gosh. On your own and actually save quite a bit of money. And this really tags on to reason number 1 is paying attention to that food quality is so important. Because when we have inflammation, it can create cortisol spikes, and we're going to chat about that in a second, which then doesn't allow us to become fat adapted. So number 7 is eating too much too often, with the goal of limiting our eating times to around 2 times per day. So I'm an emotional eater, and I eat a lot just to feel good. And it took me a long time to realize how much I relied on food to feel good. I have a history of an eating disorder. I had anorexia and bulimia many years ago, and so I still, to this day, go toward food in a way that's probably not the healthiest, and it's something we all have to work on, whether we've had a blistered relationship with food or we were diagnosed with an eating disorder. It's all a matter of having a good relationship with food and knowing when we're relying on our food in order to feel better. And so I think on keto, this magic that happens when we've been eating this way for a little while, all of a sudden we realize that food played such a huge role in our ability to show up in the world in the right way. And all of a sudden, when you're not hungry, what do? And who are you? And how do you deal with happiness and sadness and your jerk boss? And how do you just deal with these feelings? And so I think a lot of us rely on snacking, like keto snacks, like a lot of the things we see today, in order to bridge that gap of us not really being hungry, like physically hungry, but we're emotionally hungry. So something you might want to do tonight, and what was really helpful for me when I started realizing how much I relied on food, was to go home and make a list of things that make you really happy. Activities, people, thoughts, board games, whatever. And when you're trying to make yourself busy so that you don't eat, busyness is one thing, but if you're not happy being busy, avoiding to eat, you're probably just going to eat anyways. So having that list on your fridge, and when you're standing in front of the fridge like, oh my gosh, my boss was such a jerk today, I just need to have something, you can be like, wait, I'm going to do something that will keep me busy, but I'm also happy doing. So one of those things for me is going for a walk with my dog Coconut. Yes, we named our dog Coconut, like seriously. And going for a walk with her off leash and throwing a stick, and all of a sudden I forget all of my problems and everything's good. Another thing is eating nutrient-dense meals, and we've already chatted about that, will help make it so that we can go longer periods of time without eating because we're a lot more balanced. So some things that influence our hunger that aren't actually food-related or physically required are things like our food quality. When we eat the food that we're eating, the thoughts and feelings that you think while you're eating impact whether or not you're going to be hungrier later. And I love this stuff. And just monitor next time you're eating. Are you eating quickly? Are you thinking about your food? What's going on around you? Are there screaming kids just like going crazy around you, or screaming adults just going crazy? That all impacts how we are able to feel satiated from our meal. And when we're not feeling that satiation, we probably find that we eat a lot more often. So pay attention to your environment, because if we're always snacking, we're not going to be fat adapted, and we're thinking it's a ketogenic diet, when in actuality it's because you ate your lunch in a playground, and of course you're not feeling satiated because you didn't even feel the food that you were eating. The 8th reason why you may not be fat adapted yet is blood sugar. So our goal here is to manage blood sugar to put a stop to other issues. And I think in keto, and I did the same thing, I was so hyper-focused on my ketones that I forgot about blood sugar completely. And so some ways that we can balance our blood sugar: eating keto, that's a given. Also monitoring our blood sugar to determine when it goes up, when it goes down. One of the coolest things I love doing is eating a meal and seeing if my blood sugar spikes up. And if it does, and if it's keto, then I know that something in that meal means I'm sensitive to it. So say that meal was bacon, eggs, avocado. So tomorrow I'm going to have bacon and eggs. If it doesn't do it, the next day I'll have avocado. Sure enough, it spikes up. Oh, shoot, I'm sensitive to avocado. Don't worry, you can do keto without avocado, I swear. But knowing that and testing that, it can become a great, great tool that you can use to then lower your inflammation, get fat adapted, feel better on your ketogenic diet. Okay, so the last one is cortisol, and that's a way bigger conversation. But really, we want to balance our cortisol so we could generate more ketones and get fat adapted finally. And a great example of this is my husband. When we first met, he worked from 4 a.m. to 9 p.m. every day, like Monday, Friday, Saturday, like all the time. And he just said, no, I'm not stressed. But when we checked his cortisol, it was through the roof. So sometimes we don't know how stressed we really are. And when we are stressed, we are not generating ketones. When we were developing our upstairs, when we didn't have a bathroom, we didn't have a toilet in the house, I was living in our dining room, and I was taking phone consultations with my clients sitting on my bed. It was horrible. I could not generate ketones for the life of me. I was so stressed out. I was eating all the same foods, but every time I would test my ketones, it was like 0, 0, 0. And it had been like 3.5 2 weeks before. So cortisol plays a huge role. And the reason it does this is back in the day with our fight or flight response, when we were running away from the tiger, we needed energy. And that energy came from glucose. So it spikes up. And what happens, everyone? When glucose spikes up, ketones go down. And if we're always in that state of that fight or flight, our body's not prioritizing generating ketones. So a couple of ways that we can end this vicious cycle is the ketogenic diet. Carb ups play a really helpful role in this. If you're not sure what a carb up is, again, Google machine, type in carb up, maybe healthful pursuit, and you'll find a bunch of stuff that I've done on it. Eliminating stimulants like coffee, caffeine, chocolate. I swear you can do this. I do it. It's okay. You live. It's fine. 5-minute daily meditation. I love the app called Calm. It's free. Yes, it has daily meditations. They're 10 minutes. I would not be standing here right now if I didn't do those every day. A yoga practice. I love Downward Dog app. Also free. You can do 5-minute to 60-minute meditations, all free in the comfort of your own home. And I mean, my ceiling is up to here, and so my yoga is like this. So if I can do it in such a small space, there's no excuse. And rest and recovery. So if you love working out and you give yourself a rest day, park it on the couch and have a rest day. And I was guilty of that for so long. Okay, so summary before we cut to Q&A. 9 reasons you're not fat adapted yet. Food quality, carb intake, food intake, protein intake, your testing methods, fat intake, eating too much too often, blood sugar, cortisol. And if you want to learn more about how cortisol impacts your carb cravings and your carb allotment and how that is impacted by your insulin, I put together a little freebie for all of you that joined today, and you can get it at healthfulpursuit.com/sugar. Yeah, so we can cut to Q&A if you guys have questions. There's a mic right here. I can answer a couple of them, and if I don't get to everyone's question, I'll be around. I have red hair. You can't miss me. You can find me anywhere. I'm tall. It's great. Any questions at all? Oh, great. Thanks, guys. Thank you. From Calgary, yeah. Hometown. Any questions? 9 reasons. Are you coming up? Yes? Questions? Okay. Wow, this is the first. That's awesome. Okay, thank you. Okay. And I love your hair again. It's really bright.
Yeah. You're my hair sister. I adore you, girl. So in my group, we get a lot of questions about fat. We know we need it. How do we get the extra? So I'm going to ask you, Leanne, what is your absolute favorite fat? What's your go-to? What's your absolute favorite fat? What's your go-to, darling?
Probably MCT oil powder. That stuff is so easy. It doesn't get anywhere. You just can add it all the time. Your husband never knows it's in everything. Like you can, and it mixes into stuff. So it's everyone can eat the fats and love it. And I really also love the MCT oil capsules. I have a mother who really needs MCT, and that's the only way she'll take it. So I would say those two. That's probably my favorite.
Awesome. I love you, lady. I just gotta say you're wicked.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Next question. Hey.
Hi.
Hi.
I was just wondering, you said you like to talk about weight loss dolls.
Yes.
So could you give us just a few, since you have a little bit of time, just a few
Yeah.
quick tips about
Okay.
a 7-month weight loss doll
7
asking
months.
for a friend?
Okay. For asking for a friend. Okay. Okay, cool. So my favorite thing, have you heard of the whoosh effect? Is that it? Okay. My favorite thing. Okay, so imagine your fat cells are these big puffy balloons and they're super happy, and you take out a little bit of the fat from that. They don't want to be wrinkly balloons, they want to be really puffy. So what they will often do is fill up with water. And they're filling up with water and they're nice and puffy. And then the whoosh effect means that all of a sudden those fat cells lose that water and the cells get smaller. And so one of the big things that I see time and time and time again with weight loss dolls is that our cells are now full of water and they're ready to let go, but for every 1 gram of carb that we eat, we need 4 grams of water to process it. So that's why my carb up strategy, where at night you take out the fat from your keto meal and you put in carbohydrates, take out the fat, put in the carbs. So that could be something like a chicken breast instead of a chicken thigh with some broccoli and half a sweet potato. Again, I didn't say cherry turnover. That didn't come out of my mouth. And so you're having that at night. Where does the water come from when you have that carb? Those fat cells. So all of a sudden, you wake up the next morning, maybe the next day after, depends on how your body processes those carbs, but generally speaking, those carbs come out of that fat cell, they get the water comes out of the fat cell, attaches to the carb, and that's how it's processed, and all of a sudden you have a whoosh. So I cannot tell you how many times women have done this, and they've done 1 carb up once a week for 3 weeks, and all of a sudden they've broken the plateau and they're feeling great. So that would be like the number one thing that I would say if you haven't tried a sweet potato, do it. It's great. It's the best. And know that like if you've been eating keto for quite some time, you're going to go back into keto just fine. Because when we're in a glucose burning state, we're kind of like in this state. And when we move over to our fat burning state, it does take some time. But once we're here, we become very metabolically efficient. And we can just jump between both. So know that you don't need to be fearful of like, I'm going to start at square one with keto. That doesn't work that way. So have a sweet potato and let us know what happens.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, we got time for maybe one more question? Yeah.
Hi. What MCT powder would you recommend?
Great question. Perfect Keto. They're my favorite. Yeah, I love them. My whole pantry's full of them. That's the one I would recommend.
And if somebody wanted to get a consultation from you, what would be the best way to contact you?
I'm really happy you mentioned that because I forgot to say that. And I was like, shameless plug, I'm going to do this in the second slide. So I just released a program called Happy Keto Body. It's a 12-week video training program specifically for women. I partnered up with a naturopathic doctor on it. So I don't take one-on-one clients, but one of the membership options is the VIP option, which gives you forum access. So I'm always on there answering questions of the VIPs, and we also have coaching calls. And that just takes you through a 12-week video program with myself as well as Dr. Nina, one of my really good friends, on how to eat keto, how to live in your happy keto body, and really adjust that for inflammation and autoimmunity and gut issues, and hormone dysregulation is a huge piece to it. So I don't have one-on-ones anymore because I know that I can reach more people with a program like that than I could one-on-one with people, and it would just, I need to impact more humans. Yeah, does that help? Okay, great. Any other questions? We got like 1 minute, so if you have a quick question, I can answer it. Otherwise, I'll be around if it's more of a TMI question, and you're like, I am not going up to the microphone to ask this question. Yeah? Okay, well, thank you so much for coming in, and yeah, thanks.